if you went to,
Do you need it stopped recording. So, do you need a break or anything? You good? Okay. We just had to push the button again to record again.
yeah. If we went to Munich, for example, or to the Berlin area, the mission could be up to 7 hours from the time you took off until you got back again.
How long was your shortest mission? How long was the shortest one?
How long did I fly? I mean,
How long was your shortest mission? Like,
oh, the shortest one?
yeah.
Well, bombing the missile sites in northern France and Belgium was probably 2.5 to 3 hours was all, because that was just flying over the channel and bombing and turn around and come back out again. I think, in fact, my first mission, I think, was only 2.5 hours, but because that was just a little short mission to an airfield in northern France. But the average mission would probably be around 4 or 5 hours. The longer ones, could be a good 7 hours.
How many people were on your plane?
Well, the normal crew on a B24 was 10 people, but I had a lead crew, so I had an extra bombardier and an extra navigator, so I had 12. I had a crew of 12. Well, as a lead crew of.
Oh, did you have anyone die on the plane, ever?
No, anybody hurt or anything?
Yeah.
No, not on my airplane. No, we got the airplane shot up pretty bad a few times, but we never had anybody injured. We had, flak go through one guy's sleeve once and cut his jacket, but it didn't break any skin. And another guy on that Paris mission had a piece of flak, hit his flak vest. We wore a flak vest that had strips of steel in it and stuff, and it knocked him out of breath, but it didn't cut any skin. So in all those 23 missions, there was 12 people on board. We never had a single person on our airplane that got hurt, which was kind of remarkable, because a good percentage of the crews at least had somebody that got hit at least with flak.
What crew member?
What was like the most interesting position
Dangerous.
and like the most dangerous thing to be on the airplane? Like, what was the most dangerous job?
Well, we had most of our casualties and everything from being hit by flak. The big 88 and 90 millimeter German anti-aircraft guns would shoot that big shell up there, and then it would explode. It had a time fuse on it. And if it exploded close enough to your airplane, it would punch holes all through your airplane. And we lost more crews to flak than we did to anything else. Our particular group, since we flew very tight formation, we suffered less fighter attack than most of the groups over there, because they usually tried to find a little group that was flying kind of loose formation, and they'd pick off the stragglers. But our group had the reputation of flying such tight formation that I remember being in the bomber stream where you'd see a fighter group hit the group ahead of us, dive under our group, and come back up and hit the group behind us. But they left us alone. because the tighter your formation was and the harder for it was for the fighters to get through between the airplanes, the more danger they were in from, being shot by the guns on the airplane, on the turret guns on the airplane. So, so we had some losses to fighters, but not very many.
What were those planes? What German planes were those?
You mean the attack airplanes?
Yeah.
Well, Messerschmitts, the 109s were probably the most numerous, but the Focke-Wulf 190s were probably the more dangerous airplane because they could fly faster and and then they were a harder airplane to shoot down for our fighters than the 109. So we did see a few of the German jet fighters, but we never got attacked by them.
Did you have like guns on your plane that would shoot other? Did you have like guns on your plane that shot other planes, or were you just flying with just bombs?
Well, not in World War II. I flew fighters in Korea.
No, she means on your plane. You had like the tail gunner and the belly gunner. You had gunners on your plane.
Oh yeah, we had a nose turret gunner. The navigator actually manned the nose turret. We had a top turret, and we had a tail turret, and we had a ball turret gunner, and then we had 2 waist gunners. So we had 6 gunners on the airplane, shooting 2 waist guns and 4 turrets. There was a turret in the front, and in the back, and on top, and on the bottom of the airplane. The particular airplane, that B24 that I flew.
Where would they like aim their gun at on the?
Yeah, the turret was a movable turret where the gunner would sit inside of it, and he had machine guns on each side of him, and then he would aim the turret. He had a gun sight. He would aim his individual turret himself, and then fire the guns when he wanted to fire them. And in the B-24, each gunner fired his own turret, and they weren't connected in any way. On the B-29s, the gunner and the gun sight was separate from the turret itself, and he could, in some of the gun stations, he could shoot more than one turret. He could pick the turret that he wanted to fire.
So he would shoot other planes?
Yeah, the B-29 was the airplane that we were sent back to train in from England.
That didn't work real well.
Were you in contact at all with your family during the war?
Was I in?
Contact with your family?
Oh
during the
yeah,
war?
yeah. They had a system when we were in England where you would write out a letter, and then you'd have to turn the letter in to be censored. You reviewed and censored before you could send it back. They would microfilm the letter. They send the microfilm back to the U.S. and reprint it from the microfilm, and then the microfilm would be sent to whoever you had addressed it to. Now I've got some of those microfilm letters that my mother had saved that I had sent back. And in fact, I was going to include it in that book, but I didn't find them until after I had already put the book together. But I have, still have some examples of those microfilm letters. that I had sent back. In fact, that was the only means of contact we had with our family, was through those microfilm letters.
How often did you send them?
Well, I tried to write at least a letter a month. In fact, in the 10 months that I was over in England, I know my mother had saved 6 of them, but I know I had sent more than that. So I assumed I probably had sent home maybe a dozen letters during those 10 months I was over there.
Did they reply?
Well, no. Oh yeah, we did. We did get mail every once in a while. We didn't get mail that often, but it would kind of come in bunches. In other words, I remember there were times when I would get a letter and then later get a letter that had been written a month earlier. It depended on how they got bunched up. Because the letters that were sent back over to us were usually brought over by boat, and it would depend on how they got put together, because they didn't come in sequence. Sometimes you'd get 2 or 3 letters in a bunch, and then another time you'd get a letter that was written, say, in June, and then later get one that was written in May. So that wasn't as consistent as the microfilm that we sent back.
What was it like to return home from war?
Hmm?
What was it like to return home from war?
When I got back home?
Yeah.
Well, it was kind of interesting because it was a big surprise, not only to us. See, our group had been flying combat missions from starting in April through November. And then all of a sudden we got word that we were stood down for transfer back to the United States. And that was right toward the end of November. And 2 weeks later, we were on a boat coming home. So we didn't even have time to notify anybody, write a letter or anything that we were coming home. And it wasn't until we got back to the U.S., we landed in New York Harbor and got sent up to Bradley Field in Connecticut to process, that we got on the phone and notified our family that we were already back in the United States. So they didn't even know we had gotten back until we were already back. And of course I wasn't there, but I heard the family tell about my mom was home, and the mailman from Voltaire came driving out to the house at the farm, and he jumped out of the car and was yelling at Mom, and she at first thought, oh gee, what happened? And then he had this telegram in his hand. He said, Francis is back. So that's how she found out about it, was this, the mailman from Voltaire driving this telegram out to Mom and giving it to her. And that was just a week before Christmas, 1944. And of course, I stopped off at my uncle's house, Uncle Henry, Mom's brother in Minneapolis, because that's where the trains stopped. I had to switch trains, and I stayed there with him And then I was able to call home from there and tell them I was back. So it was, you know, a very kind of an exciting time because it all happened so quick and everything without any pre-planning or anything. And then I was able to stay home for 2 or 3 weeks. And then in January, I had to go back and start my B29 training. So,
Oh, you went back? You came home and then went back in the war?
well, we were being transferred over to the Pacific in B29s. But it took us from January to August to finish our B29 training. And our flyaway date was the date that the Japanese surrendered. We already had sent our baggage and everything by boat. You know, our footlockers and everything had already left. In fact, they made it as far as Hawaii, and then they were stopped and sent back. But the flyaway crews, we had our airplanes, and all the flyaway crews, we were at Fairmont, Nebraska, on an air base. And our flyaway date was that next morning. And we got notice at 4 o'clock that afternoon that we were stood down, that the Japanese had surrendered. And it was kind of hectic because the base commander immediately closed the base, said nobody could leave. But we had gotten word that there wasn't any liquor or anything in Okinawa for the officers' clubs, you know, and the enlisted clubs. So they had gotten a hold of some liquor dealer, and he had brought a whole truckload of liquor and everything, and we had placed it on the airplanes, you know, cases of these liquor for the 2 clubs was, you know, scattered on all of these airplanes that were going to fly away. Well, when they got word that we had been stood down and that the Japanese had surrendered, everybody ran out there and started unloading this stuff from the airplanes and brought them into the officers' club and the enlisted clubs there at Fairmont. And they were opening up these cases of liquor, pouring it down each other's back of each other's shirts and all this kind of stuff. And they had the floor in those officers' club, and I wasn't in the enlisted club, but in the officers' club, and the floor was just soaked with stuff that had just been poured out on the floor, all this stuff. And I remember the base provost marshal was a major at Fairmont, and he came running up to me and said, "What are we going to do? What are we going to do?" I said, "Well, just relax." Said, "These guys are pouring most of it on the floor anyway. They're not even bothering to drink." I said, "They can't go anyplace. And, you know, and they're just going to waste it all and use it up, and that's the end of it." And of course, that's exactly what happened. You know, everybody was hooting and hollering around, and they couldn't leave the base and couldn't do anything. But they wasted all of that liquor that we had stored up to take over to the clubs in Okinawa. All that ended up being, most of it poured on the floor there at the clubs at Fairmont. But we came that close. It was a matter of about 16 hours. We would have been in the airplanes, you know, we had left. And we got word that the Japanese surrendered.
And that was it for you, huh? That was the end of the war for you?
And well, that was the end of the combat part of it.